Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground video podcast. My name's Brian Roach, and I will be your host through the process. And I haven't been on for a while. It's been hectic. I'm still in draft recovery mode, I feel like. But I got my Neurosonic. I got my Steelers hat if I need it, but I don't because it's warm. And I'm ready to go. And got a couple things I want to talk about today. Starting with the assignment of jersey numbers. And what's interesting about the assignment of the jersey numbers has to do with two players who are not currently on the roster and who we may have been wondering whether or not they're going to come back. Those two players would be Shamarko Thomas and DeAngelo Williams. Shamarko was 29, and Brian Allen, the cornerback we drafted out of Utah, has taken that number. And DeAngelo, we know, is 34, and Niles Davis has taken that number. So with the issuance of those two jersey numbers, does that mean these guys are done? Well, it's a kind of a tale of two players. I think it's a pretty good chance Shamarko has played his last down, barring some unforeseen injuries. It's a guy who we had high hopes for, who was hoped to be groomed to be Troy Polamalu's successor, and it never worked out through injuries, an inability to just stay on the field, and kind of an over aggressiveness maybe even on the field. It's hard to say. I mean, honestly, it's really hard for any of the fans, myself included, to judge a player and say he's not capable or that he doesn't grasp the defense correctly, because we're not in the rooms. We don't know, but it sure looks like Shamarko had a tough time getting a handle on the defense that the Steelers wanted to run, out of position, and just the guy could not get on the field for defensive snaps. And I think part of that can be seen in some of the aggressive plays he made on special teams, where I think, what was it, at least a couple times in the last two seasons, we've gotten interference calls on kicks and punts, and just not being fully aware of where he is on the field and what's going on, and that lack of football awareness, I guess. I don't know of a better way to describe it. I think finally sunk Shamarko, and I don't really think there's a scenario that Shamarko finds his way back onto the roster. I think even if the Steelers were to suffer a slew of injuries at the safety position, where they are slightly thin, it's still unlikely that I think Shamarko gets a call back. I think there's other options, and I think the Steelers have said, thank you very much for your service, and moved on. So I think Brian Allen is safe with 29. Then we come to DeAngelo. Most of the Steelers fans I talk to, most of the Steelers fans I see posting, most of the Steelers fans I hear calling into shows, or even sometimes amongst the Steel City Underground chat room, would like to see DeAngelo return for another year. With the drafting of James Conner, that seems very unlikely. There's not really any way in the world the Steelers are going to carry 5 running backs. I don't think that's going to happen. Le'Veon is going to be in place. I think James Conner will be in place. They signed Niles Davis primarily to be a kick returner, in my opinion, and a special teams player. But he fits that third running back as well. And then you've got Fitzgerald Toussaint, who has been around and potentially provide some depth. If I'm DeAngelo Williams, do I want to come back, and do I want to go through training camp to be the third guy at best on the roster? And I'm not saying that, look, James Conner was drafted to be a backup. Doesn't mean that he's the backup day one. He still has to learn the NFL. He has to get acclimated to the speed of play in the NFL. So it won't surprise me if something happens along the way and let's say Niles Davis gets hurt or another running back gets hurt and the Steelers decide, well, why not bring DeAngelo back? It won't even surprise me if they bring DeAngelo back and cut Fitzgerald Toussaint at some point during the training camp, OTA, preseason, so to speak, season. Because, quite frankly, who better to learn from? I mean, obviously, Le'Veon, but than a savvy vet like DeAngelo Williams. So I don't think the door is 100% closed on DeAngelo Williams. I think it's 90% closed on DeAngelo Williams. I think there's still a chance that he could come back. So it in my gut, I doubt it. But I wouldn't say never on that one. Shamarko, I think, is gone, and that's that. But I think DeAngelo, there's still a light burning in the window if, in fact, at some point down the road, we have a need. If that need doesn't transpire, then yeah, probably he's certainly done. The next thing I want to jump into is the schedule. I haven't talked about the schedule yet, but some of the interesting things that have been popped up, and I've read a lot, and I know we've done articles on the site about the schedule, and people are basically saying, oh my God, we've got one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. I think the last thing I read was it was the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's going to be true by season end. And there's a lot of reasons why, but part of the reason is that a lot of the teams we're playing had rough years last year. And, you know, of course, strength of schedule right now is based on their records from last year. So when you're dealing with teams like the Vikings and the Bears and really we've got the NFC Central Division, right? So let's be real. It was a tough year for those guys. The Packers barely eked their way into the playoffs. The Lions managed to make their way in. The Vikings lost one quarterback, and then they lost AP, and they had to depend on Sam Bradford. And the Bears were a hot mess. Let's be honest. The Bears were a hot mess. I think the Bears are probably going to be a hot mess again this year. But I think the Vikings are going to be better. I think the Lions are going to be better. And I would bet you dollars to donuts that the Packers are going to be better. And if those three teams improve a couple games each, all of a sudden this is not the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL anymore. We have both. We have the Lions in Detroit, and we have the Bears in Chicago. Now, the Bears is early in the year. I think that's a game that we should win. I think our home opener against the Vikings is a game that we should win. But then we start to get towards the mid of the season, and the Lions are going to have had chance to develop and to gel. And I think they have a lineup that has some potential. So at the Lions on October 29th is a game that could be interesting. Should we win? Yes, we should win. Will we win? I don't know. They could be better. The Colts are likely going to be better. They did address many of their issues through this offseason. So we have them at home. Now, I know we've owned them. Ben has owned them. He's thrown like 477,000 touchdowns against them in the last 2 quarters, right? They've given up 50 billion yards passing to us. But that's not going to continue forever. They are making improvements. They're a team that's trying to get better. They did, I think, draft some corners. They drafted for their defense. They have a chance to be a much better team. So it's unlikely that they're going to be the pushover that they have been in the past. So, there's some games on this schedule that are not as easy as they may seem. I'm going to point out at the Colts, at the Lions, at the Chiefs. Now, those are 3 road games we could easily lose. The Chiefs are never going to be an easy out at home. Yes, I know we beat them with 6 field goals or whatever wizardry came off of Boz's toe in the playoffs, but you can't count on that. And again, in truth, we're a better team than the Chiefs are. At least we were last year, and I think we will be again this year. And there's a certain number of caveats on here in determining this schedule. And I'll just come out and you see I've got the Martavis jersey over here because I just want to welcome Martavis back into the fold. So I've got my Martavis jersey over here. And the thing is, if Martavis comes back and is the player he was before he left, all right? If Martavis comes back and is the player he was, the offense is at least 30 to 40% better than it was last year. Sammy, I don't know. You can read as well as I can all of the prognostications about the 53 and about what's going to happen with our wide receiver depth, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the truth is, if you put this guy on the other side of Antonio Brown, and if we have Ladarius Green, I know that one is even a bigger if. But even if we have Jesse James, okay, who proved to be a capable tight end down the middle, if you put AB and MB on the field at the same time, this with Le'Veon as well, this is a scary, scary offense, and could do some really frightening things to other teams. And if that comes to pass and the Steelers can get through the season with that kind of a offensive potential, there's really not a team on this schedule they can't beat. In fact, there's not a team in the NFL they can't beat if that's the case. Now, who knows, what the defense is going to be like. Who knows if we're going to have to outscore teams, 40 to 37. I don't think that's going to be the case. The defense showed marked improvement last year at the end of the season without Cam Hayward, and Cam will be back. So that's a huge boost to the defense all by itself. It provides greater depth on the defensive line. It provides an emotional leader that was missing last year. It provides his drive, his work ethic. It provides the spark on the field that nobody else really can provide. I know Bob Labriola was doing an ask and answered, and somebody asked him who he thought the most important person on the defense is, and he said Cam Hayward, closely followed by Ryan Shazier. And I would echo that. And it's not just because for most of last season I went by Ironhead on Facebook. It's because I think Cam is the heart and soul of this defense. And that may not be the case in the next couple years. He may be a part of the heart and soul, but right now Cam is the focal point. And if he comes back and it is the Cam that we're used to, which I see no reason to expect anything different, this is a better defense just by doing that. Cam will provide pressure that we weren't getting consistently. He will provide leadership. He will provide help, and it will be a better defense. If Cody Sensabaugh is any better than Ross Cockrell, we could have a better secondary. I know when Joe and I were talking after the draft, after the third day, we talked about Brian Allen, the cornerback that we drafted out of Utah. And I said very clearly, I think he'll make the 53. And I'm sticking to that. I think he makes the 53-man roster. I think that he pushes for starting time, for playing time against the other corners before the end of the season. I think that Brian Allen is raw. I think that he is incredibly talented, and he is something that we haven't seen, a big, tall corner who can catch, who has ball skills. The guy was a wide receiver, and he has hands. He's Ike Taylor who could catch, or could be Ike Taylor who could catch. And don't be dissing my boy Ike. I know you guys are going to think back to the last couple years of Ike's career and say he lost a step. Well, they all lose a step before the end, right? But Ike was a shutdown corner. Ike could have been a perennial Pro Bowl player if he did not have the proverbial hands of stone. If Ike could catch the ball more than he did, if he had picked off a few more passes, he'd have been a Pro Bowler every year, because he went up against the number one receiver of every team we played, and he shut them down. All right, enough ranting about Ike. Ike is the guy. I love Ike. I like Ike. And I think Brian Allen can be that guy, except I think he can catch. So we're talking about a guy who's, 6'3", 6'4". You put a little muscle back on him. You get him in with Carnell Lake to learn and have him learn from, Tomlin, from Lake, how to do that. He's a guy who can probably play press man. Get him to follow up behind Artie and Ross and Will Gay. And I'm telling you, by sometime mid-season, he's going to be pushing for playing time. That's what I think. It's a guess. Let's be honest. It's a guess based on the limited film I've seen of Brian Allen. It's a guess based on projections. And let's be honest, I can't even get this for free, right? I can't even get Neurosonic to sponsor the podcast or the video podcast. So, nobody's paying me thousands and billions of dollars to make these projections. But I'm also not a complete moron, or at least I like to pretend I'm not. I'm a fairly smart guy, and I can at least tell that a guy can catch the ball, and Brian Allen can catch the ball. And it certainly looks like he knows how to play the eyes of the quarterback. He knows how to play the position at a very raw level, but he could get better. So I like that in him. So if you got Brian Allen getting better and maybe pressing the guys in front of him, I think Ross Cockrell will actually be better this year than he was last year. And while I don't know if Ross can play press man, I know Artie can, and I know Cam Sutton can. So I think Cody Sensabaugh can. So we've got the ability to start mixing things up a little bit. And it's not, when we start talking about, we got to play man, we don't got to play man all the time. The ideal situation for any defense is to be unpredictable to a certain extent. You don't always want to have the quarterback go, they're in man, because eventually he can figure it out, right? Or they're in zone, because eventually he's going to figure it out. You need to be able to mix it up. We need to be able to play man sometimes. We need to play zone sometimes. So we need guys that can do both. And I think we have that mix. We have something like 11 corners on the roster. It's going to be an interesting training camp. And it'll be really, really tough to see who makes the final 53. And they may carry one more corner than they normally do because they've got such a crop. We're a little thin at safety. I know there's been a lot of talk about Will Gay moving to safety. Will Gay needs to move to safety to save his career. Will Gay needs to move to safety to do this. Will Gay only needs to move to safety if he is capable of moving to safety, and I am not convinced that he is. It's not that it's an unquestionable move. I mean, there's a Hall of Famer who once wore 26 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who was a corner that moved to safety, and that was Rod Woodson. William Gay's not Rod Woodson. Let's be clear. Doesn't mean it can't be done. I just don't see it with Will Gay. I don't think it's really going to prolong his career. At some point, when you've lost enough steps, you're just done. And I think Will Gay is awesome. I love Will Gay. I love his story. I love the big play capability that he's shown during his time with the Steelers. But I think his time is no longer now, and it's closer to being over than it is not to being over. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe he comes back rejuvenated to camp. It's going to be interesting. I think he's a guy who could be on the bubble, Will Gay. So anyway, I jumped off of that. I was talking about the schedule. Obviously, I don't think the Browns are going to beat us. I think we have 2 wins against the Browns. I think this could be the year, especially if we have Martavis. If Justin Hunter can be better because he's playing with a potential future Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger, as opposed to the guys he's been playing with throughout his career. If he can be better, if we can keep a tight end on the field, if Le'Veon's healthy, if all those things occur, there's no reason we shouldn't beat the Ravens twice. The Ravens are not that good this year. They weren't that good last year. They're not going to be that good this year. It feels like they addressed nothing in the draft. They drafted more best player available, I think. Even then, I question it than they did for need. And the problem is, I think that they've got now a herd of corners that they still you know, need to be able to weed through and figure out who's going to play. They've got secondary stuff, but they can't get to the quarterback. They didn't draft anybody to play. I don't know. I don't. We'll see. You know, they always play us tough, but I think we can beat the Ravens twice. And we can certainly beat the Bengals twice. I think you want to talk about a team that I still don't understand their draft. My brother, who I love dearly, but is clearly wrong in the head because he's a Bengals fan. And as smart a guy as he is, he's just, you know, look, he's the ultimate homer. What can I tell you? We're from Ohio. I'm from Ohio. He still lives in Columbus. He's a Buckeye fan. I can respect that part. I don't get this Bengals fixation he has. And the problem is, you know, I asked him, I said, what do you think of the Bengals draft? And he responded to me and he said, they've done a good job in the draft. I trust them. And well, to a certain extent, I understand that. They have drafted okay. I wouldn't say they've drafted phenomenally, but they've drafted okay. They've done a good job of building their team through the draft, partially because, of course, they don't really give a crud who they draft. They'll draft a criminal as much as they'll draft anybody for character. And maybe that's the character they want. I don't know. You know, it does sometimes feel like they're building a team of Vontaze Burficts over there. That's fine. Hey, whatever works for you guys. You know what I mean? But, you know, for a team that lost basically all its offensive linemen to not draft an offensive lineman until deep in the draft, I think they did finally do it. Can't remember. Was insane to me. Insane. And we take another wide receiver. Look, I actually get the need for the wide receiver. We don't know what AJ Green's situation is. He was hobbled much of last season. He was hurt a couple times, and he's getting older. At some point, he will lose a step. At some point, he will not be the AJ Green that we're used to, and they will need help. So I get the drafting of the wide receiver. The running back, Joe Mixon, when you already have Giovanni Bernard and the other guy, who I can't remember his name. But what do I need to remember his name? I'm not a Bengals fan. So if they got those two guys, they already have two essentially starting level running backs, and they're going to draft a third running back. What are they going to do with him? Especially when they had all that other need. I don't get it. But so I think we can actually go undefeated in the division. But to be safe, somebody will beat us. It won't be the Browns, but we'll either split with the Ravens or the Bengals, because we always seem to drop one game that we shouldn't in the division. So, you know, if we come out of the division, you know, those 6 games, if we come out 5-1, that's pretty good. And I think that probably is good enough for us to win the division based on the rest of the schedule. So, you know, I think we can beat the Vikings. We should beat the Bears. Packers and Lions. Well, we're playing the Packers at home, so I'm going to give that one to us. You know, the Lions game, it's right in front of the bye. I don't think we have anything to look ahead to. It's right after a Bengals game, but it's got a full week. It's a Sunday night game. Ben likes to play at night. He likes the spotlight. I think we probably win. So I think we can sweep that division. That would give us 9-1, right? So we got 7 other games. I'm going to say we lose to the Chiefs in Kansas City, not because I really honestly believe we're going to lose to the Chiefs in Kansas City, but because we could lose to the Chiefs in Kansas City. So now we're 9-2, right? The Jaguars, the Titans are going to be good. You watch. The Titans are going to be a much better team this year. We'll see. If Marcus Mariota can continue to improve as a quarterback, the Titans are going to be a good team, and that's going to be a tough game, even though it's at home. Again, it's a night game. That might be a Thursday game on a short week after the Colts. That's going to be questionable. I think we got to give ourselves a nod because we're at home. I actually think that we're going to beat the Patriots in Pittsburgh. I think we would have beaten them last year in Pittsburgh if Ben had been healthy. You know, it's 2 games before the end of the season. It could be a really important game. It is 4:25 game. It's not prime time, but I'm not sure we're going to win on Christmas, though, at Houston. The Texans, it's going to depend on if they have a quarterback, I'll be honest. If Tom Savage can play and they can get the ball out to the weapons that they have, or if it's late enough in the season that Deshaun Watson is in there and he can play, we could lose that game in Texas. They have a tremendous defense, and it will probably only get better with J.J. Watt coming back. It'll be interesting to see how at that point in the season TJ has matured and whether he is able to begin essentially going up against his brother, and whether they let JJ play fullback, right? So I see some potential here. Now the issue is, what I said was, I don't think any of these teams are going to be as bad as they were last year. So first of all, the Texans, I don't think the Texans are going to be limping into the playoffs this year. I think the Texans win their division outright and they win it easily. I think the Jaguars will be better than they were last year. I still don't know if I think they're going to be a winning team, but I think they'll be better than they were last year. I think the Colts will be better team than they were and could be a playoff team. The Browns, who knows? It is hard to give our schedule any real fright when we're bookended with the Browns to end and close it. But we've got the Texans, we got the Patriots, we've got 2 games with the Ravens, 2 games with the Bengals, the Packers. We've got a Colts team that's going to be better and a Titans team that's going to be better, and the Chiefs at home. That's not an easy set of games. And this absurdity of us playing 1, 2, 3, 4 primetime games in a row makes me more mad because I have to get up at 4 in the morning to drive to work. But be that as it may, I think that at the end of the year, this is not going to be the 5th easiest schedule in the league. I think some of these teams are going to be playoff teams that weren't playoff teams last year, and I think most of these teams are going to be improved record-wise than they were last year. I won't say this could be in the top 10 most difficult schedules by the end of the season, but I bet you it's in the upper half of more difficult schedules. I bet you if you cut the schedules in half and there's 32 teams and 16 is the cutoff, I bet this is somewhere in 1 to 16 for strength of schedule by the end of the year, as opposed to in the lower half, even though right now it's considered to be easy. So that's just my take on that. I already started talking about the 53, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. And I really want to talk about the 2 areas that I think are the biggest battle areas, corner and wide receiver. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think I like Eli Rogers a lot, but he did not break out last year the way I think we hoped he would. Pardon me while I take a brief pause to drink some Neurosonic. How refreshing. I tried their wild berry flavor. This is called Superfruit Infusion. I like this better than I like wild berry. I'll just let you guys know, Neuro, you need to work on the wild berry. I got used to it. I can drink it. I ordered a whole case of it. It's not my favorite. I'm going back to Superfruit Infusion. Okay, wide receivers. The thing about the wide receiver group is we got Juju, we've got Eli, we've got Martavis, we've got AB. That's 4 guys right there who I think are going to be on the roster. So if you got those 4 guys, and you got a battle probably between Juju and Eli for the slot receiver, where does that leave Sammy Coates? Well, I think that leaves Sammy Coates in the in the Darius Hayward-Bay position. And I think despite how good he is on special teams, despite the value he provides as leadership, I think this could be, if it's not his last year with the Steelers, he might not even be there this year. He could be a roster casualty, a camp casualty. Because let's be honest, Darius is a great guy, and he's been much better than we thought he would be signing. I think they got much more out of Darius Hayward-Bay than they ever anticipated getting. But here's what he is. He's a backup wide receiver who can contribute on special teams and provide veteran leadership. He's a guy that is going to drop the ball more than he catches it if you put him out there. And they didn't put him out there very often. He has skills. He has speed. He's inconsistent. He's always been inconsistent. He is in the role that he was probably meant to play on a team. He was done a huge disservice by being drafted as high as he was by the Raiders. threw his career into high expectations that probably were never warranted. He's a great guy, but he's not a number one wide receiver, and he never was going to be a number one wide receiver. He just doesn't have the hands. He's too inconsistent catching the ball. He does provide tremendous value on special teams. So you know what? We just drafted a whole lot of young guys who also better be able to play special teams. And there's a couple of guys that we brought in as undrafted free agents, one of whom is the linebacker out of Louisville, who I think is Keith Kelsey. I think that guy is this year's Tyler Matakevich, and he could push. It's inside linebacker. We have a need there. We're not overstocked at inside linebacker. And I think there's a chance he has a push there, and we could see Keith Kelsey make the final cut, as opposed to being a practice squad guy. We'll see. I'm not as certain of that as I'd like to say, but I think there's a chance there, because I also think there's a chance that the guard that we drafted, Cooper from Indiana, Pennsylvania, could hang around. I think worst case, both of those guys make the practice squad. I looked through today the invites to rookie minicamp, and before anybody goes off on their high horse about Dylan Buechele, the quarterback from Duquesne, he's not going to be around for long. I'm just letting you know. Neither is Nick Schuschler. Those guys are camp arms. That's all they're ever going to be as far as the Steelers are going to go. The quarterbacks are going to be this: Ben, Landry, Dobbs. Done. Those are the three guys that are going to make the roster. The rest of them are not. Okay, and they may not even be. I don't think either one of those guys is even going to be the practice squad, because Josh Dobbs will be probably running the practice squad, or Landry will. I tried to see if I could find a guy in the invites that I thought, this guy has a chance. He could conceivably surprise somebody and maybe make the team. And I'm going to be honest with you. If they didn't sign the guy as an undrafted free agent, if he wasn't a draft pick, I don't see it. I've looked through this list of guys like Christian Brown, who's a defensive end from West Virginia, Kendall Pace, an offensive tackle from Columbia. You've got a guy named Desmond Tucker, defensive tackle from Iowa State. And you've got some guys with 1 year of eligibility who are going to be there at camp too. Guys like Roy Fillen and Akili Blunt, who's Mel Blunt's son. I don't know where the room is for these guys. While it would be fantastic for Mel Blunt's son to make the team. I mean, come on, that would just be awesome, right? You got a Hall of Fame legend of the Steelers. It would be awesome to have his son make the team. But he's a linebacker, and there's not a lot of room. Unless he's playing inside, there's not a lot of room. And I mean, he could play inside. He's 6'2", 250. He could be an inside guy, I guess. I don't know what his skill sets are. To be honest, I don't know enough about him to make any real determination. But he's an invite. Well, he's actually signed to the roster. I'm pretty sure. But so he's one of the guys that maybe makes the practice squad, but I don't see him making the 53. I think most of these guys are going to be camp bodies. There's a tight end on here who's intriguing because he's humongous, right? He's 6'8". It's this guy. I'm not sure if I can say his name right. Fazahan Odom. I'm just going to call him Odom. He's from Fordham. The guy is ginormous. And there's an outside chance that guy could make an impression. You got a 6'8" guy. If he catches a couple balls that are kind of tricky, there's a guy that might sneak on, right? Sneak into the mix as a rookie camp invite. But I think for the most part, you're dealing with a bunch of invitees who are not going to be around after rookie training camp. But they're there to push the draft picks and the undrafted free agents. We'll see. The other battle that I think is going to be interesting to watch in the 53 is Keon Adams. And if you go back and you look at tape on Keon Adams, he played all over on the line. He played on the outside. He played on the inside. And the kid has motor, no doubt. We interviewed him prior to the draft, so I'm glad that he was drafted by the Steelers in the 7th round. There's a guy that, despite the fact that we now have more outside linebackers than we can shake a stick at, has a chance to push, certainly for the practice squad and maybe for the 53. So let's look at our outside linebacker depth, because it's interesting, right? You got Debo, who I think, if we're wise, we will spell during the first half of the year, because we went full Debo for the second half of last season, and it worked. It paid off, right? But the reason we could get away with that is because he was platooned. There was a rotation during the beginning of the year, and he split a lot of time with Chicolo and Moats and Jarvis. So I think it'll be interesting to see what we do with Debo. I don't think we can go full bore Debo at the beginning of the year. As much as Mike Tomlin may not want to have an outside linebacker rotation, I think on that side of the line, while we are getting TJ Watt up to speed, we're going to have a rotation. It may be primarily Debo, but we're going to have a rotation there. And it'll be interesting to see what happens during training camp as to whether or not guys like TJ Watt and Keon Adams and Anthony Chicolo and Arthur Moats, who stands out, right? Who wins the camp battles? Who is the guy that says, you can't cut me? Because if you do, or you can't put me on the practice squad, because if you try and put me on the practice squad, I'm going to sign with another team. Now, look, I think the only guy even eligible is Keon Adams, right? They're not going to put TJ Watt on the practice guy. He's first round draft pick. And Moats is a veteran. He's not going to practice squad. Chicolo is third, fourth year. He's not going to the practice squad. I don't think either one of those guys is eligible to go to the practice squad. Certainly Debo's not. That would never even be a consideration. It's a silly statement. I can't believe I said it. I must need more neuro. So I think what'll happen is this. You got Bud Dupree on one side. I don't think Bud's coming off the field unless he needs a spot spell. So you got Bud on one side taking essentially 100% of the snaps on his side of the field. On the other side, you've got Watt, you've got Debo, you've got Moats, you've got Chicolo, and maybe you've got Adams. Well, that's 5 guys. It's way too many. You're not going to rotate that many guys. I think that they'll keep 5 outside linebackers. And if that's the depth that we take into the season is 5 outside linebackers, I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, which is an awful feeling. I'm going to pull the roster up while I'm looking at this. But if we keep 5 guys, that means one of those guys is going to be an odd man out. Now, if they feel like Keon Adams needs the development time, certainly he could be put on the practice squad, right? And if he's on the practice squad, then assuming nobody tries to snatch him off of that practice squad, he's safe. And then we don't really have much of a conversation, because we're now down to Arthur Moats, Anthony Chicolo, TJ Watt, Debo, and Bud Dupree. That's our 5 guys, right? So who am I forgetting? Am I forgetting somebody? Not really. Wow. Okay. Good job, me. I'm not forgetting anybody. You got LJ Fort. I don't think LJ is really going to push this group. But let's say that Keon Adams just blows up in camp. Let's say he has a tremendous camp. Let's say that Anthony Chicolo figures it out this year, and those 2 guys are pushing the envelope in camp. Let's say TJ Watt plays great in camp, and now you've got Adams, Watt, and Chick, who are the young guys, right? The future. And you got Arthur Moats, who has 1 year left on his deal. Who goes? I think Arthur Moats is fantastic. I think he is a fantastic veteran member. I think he provides more to the team than just what he contributes. But it's a guy that, if the circumstances dictate, he's not the future on the team. And it could be one of these other guys that is. So, I don't know. While I don't believe Arthur Moats is going to get cut, there's a potential. Again, it's why it's going to be an interesting camp battle. So, I think on the offensive side, obviously we know what the running backs are going to be. We know the offensive line. The question is whether our fourth-round draft pick last year, who was injured, can come in and battle against Chris Hubbard, taking over, our backup tackle position. Does Chris Hubbard stay? Does Chris Hubbard end up not staying? I think B.J. Finney did a great job. Can Cooper come in and try? Ethan Cooper, the guy that we drafted, undrafted free agent, can he come in and try and pull a B.J. Finney on B.J. Finney? I don't think so. B.J. Finney played really, really well last year and showed a lot of development, which is good. And I think that he's a guy they really like. And he played center and guard and has that versatility and that flexibility. So I think, again, but from that standpoint, we're in good shape. Is Ladarius able to play and play through the year, or does he have more concussion issues? Can Jesse James elevate his game a little bit more? And outside of that, where do we go? We have the other tight end from Pittsburgh, Scott Orndorff, who could push the X-Man, Xavier Grimble, right out the door. I think David Johnson, being that he also can play some fullback, may be around just in the event Rosie Nix, who had some back issues last year, could get hurt. But I think Rosie Nix is locked up the fullback position. So I think we're pretty set on the offense. There's going to be some questions, the wide receiver, whether Justin Hunter can make the team, whether Darius Hayward-Bade makes the team, how many wide receivers are we going to keep? Interesting questions that we have several months to discuss. The defensive side, again, the corners, I think we're set at safety. I think that we know who our inside linebackers are going to be. The question is who's going to back up Vince Williams and Ryan Shazier. Is it Tyler Matakevich? Is it LJ Fort? Is it Akili Blunt? Is it Keith Kelsey? Who's going to be the guys that are in the middle? There's been some talk about Arthur Moats moving inside. I don't see that happening. I could be wrong. I don't see it happening. I think he stays as an outside guy. So I think there's a lot of excitement coming up. Our season looks really good. We've got a schedule, I think, that even if it doesn't end up being super easy, I think is slanted in our benefit. And we've got some really interesting camp battles coming up. I think we're probably the most set we've been in a season that I can remember for several years. But at the same time, we've got two key positions that we're wondering who's going to be our backups. I think our starters are pretty much set. But the interesting thing is it's all guesswork right now, right? So we'll see how it all plays out, and we'll keep talking about it. If you've got any comments, any suggestions, any questions, please leave them below. We do read the comments, and for now, as Jill likes to say, stay safe, be good, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.